The smell hit me 5 miles out. It wasn't the smell of a campfire or burning trash. It was the smell of accelerant, sweet, chemical, and wrong. I floored the truck, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I turned onto the gravel driveway, my world ended. The barn wasn't there. There was only a skeleton of black wood, glowing orange in the night, and the silence was louder than any scream. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I don't remember stopping the truck. I don't remember opening the door. I just remember running. The heat was still radiating from the pile of ash that used to be the west barn, pushing me back, but I fought through it. Evan, Ryder. I screamed their names until my throat tasted like blood. No answer. Just the popping of cooling timber and the hiss of steam where the fire department had already done their useless work. A heavy hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. It was a firefighter, his face smeared with soot, his eyes full of that pity I learned to hate in a single second. "Sir, you can't go in there," he said, his voice muffled by the mask hanging around his neck. "It's not stable. My boys," I choked out, grabbing his turnout gear. "My twins. They were playing. They were building a fort in the loft." The firefighter didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just looked down at his boots, and that small movement broke me into a million jagged pieces. I fell to my knees in the mud and ash, the orange glow of the embers blurring through the tears I couldn't stop. They were 8 years old. They liked dinosaurs and grilled cheese sandwiches. They were afraid of the dark. And now, the dark had taken them. The next 3 hours were a blur of flashing lights and official clipboards. The sheriff, a man named Grant who I'd known since high school, walked over to me. I was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over my shoulders, staring at nothing. "Mason," Grant said, his voice heavy. "I'm so sorry. The chief says it looks like an electrical fault. Old wiring in the loft. It went up fast. They probably didn't even wake up." I looked up at him. My eyes felt dry, like the fire had burned the moisture right out of them. "Electrical fault." "Yeah," Grant said, shifting his weight. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Old barns, you know how it is. Dry wood, rats chewing wires. It's a tragedy, Mason. A terrible accident." I stood up, the blanket sliding off into the dirt. I walked past him, ignoring his calls to stop. I walked right up to the police line tape and ducked under it. "Mason, stop," Grant yelled. I ignored him. I wasn't just a grieving father. Not anymore. For 10 years, I had been a specialist for a unit that didn't officially exist. My specialty wasn't shooting, it was burning. I knew fire. I knew how it breathed, how it moved, and most importantly, I knew what it left behind. I knelt near the foundation of what used to be the main support beam. The wood here hadn't just burned, it had liquefied. The char pattern wasn't jagged and natural like an electrical fire. It was deep, uniform, and greasy. I reached out and touched the blackened soil. It felt oily. I brought my fingers to my nose. Under the smell of wet ash, there it was. A faint, sweet scent of refined jet fuel mixed with styrofoam. Homemade napalm. This wasn't an electrical fault. Wires don't smell like chemistry. "Mason, get back here." Grant was grabbing my arm again, pulling me away. I let him pull me. I didn't fight. I couldn't let him see what I knew. If I told him now, if I screamed that this was murder, the evidence would disappear. I knew how these things worked. If a fire like this happened in a quiet town and the sheriff was calling it an accident before the smoke even cleared, then the sheriff wasn't just incompetent. He was compromised. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding hollow and dead, even to my own ears. "Okay, Grant, take me to the station. I need to sign the papers." Grant looked relieved. "That's best, Mason. Go stay at the motel tonight. We'll handle the cleanup." Cleanup, that's what they called it. Sweeping my life under the rug. I spent that night in a cheap motel room with peeling wallpaper. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the neon sign flicker. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cage. That was the detail Grant hadn't mentioned, but I had seen it. Buried in the ash, near where the loft used to be, were metal bars. They weren't part of the barn structure. They were a dog cage. A large one. My boys didn't own a dog. Someone had put them in there. Someone had locked them in. And then someone had poured that accelerant and lit a match. I stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at me looked 10 years older than he had this morning. His eyes were dark pits. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had salvaged from the ruins. It was a small, half-melted toy soldier. Evan's favorite. I squeezed it until the sharp plastic dug into my palm, piercing the skin. The pain felt good. It was the only real thing left. They think I'm just a farmer, I whispered to the empty room. They think I'm just a grieving dad who's going to cry and move on. I went to my duffel bag, the one I kept in the truck, the one I hadn't opened since I left the service. I unzipped it. Inside, nestled in black foam, was my kit. Thermal sensors, chemical testers, and my notebook. I wasn't a farmer. I was a ghost. And whoever did this had just invited hell to their doorstep. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. I thought you were dead, Mason. I said. But someone woke me up. I need a name, Ryder. I need to know who is moving Blue Fire mix in this county. There was a long silence on the other end. Blue Fire. That's cartel stuff, Mason. That's Victor's crew. You don't want to mess with them. They own the police, the judges, everyone. I don't care who they own, I said, looking at the toy soldier in my bleeding hand. I'm going to burn it all down. Starting tonight. Mason, listen to me. I hung up. I knew Victor. Not personally, but I knew the type. A gang boss who thought fear made him untouchable. He thought burning a man's family would make that man run away. He didn't know that fire was my friend. He didn't know that I had spent a decade learning how to control the uncontrollable. I grabbed my keys. The sun was coming up, but for me, it was still pitch black. I wasn't going to the police station. I was going back to the ashes. I had work to do. The coroner didn't hand me 2 death certificates when I visited the morgue. He handed me a small, clear plastic bag. He checked the hallway first, his eyes darting left and right to make sure no deputies were watching. Then he pressed it into my palm. I shouldn't be giving you this, he whispered, his voice shaking. Sheriff Grant told me to lose it. He said it was just debris from the roof. I looked down at the bag. Inside was a heavy steel padlock, fused shut by intense heat. But it wasn't just melted. The lock was on the cage, Mason, the coroner said, a tear leaking out of his eye. And the keyhole. Look at the keyhole. Someone filled it with superglue before they lit the fire. They wanted to make absolutely sure those boys couldn't get out. I gripped the bag until the jagged metal edges dug into my skin through the plastic. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I would have roared. I just nodded at the man, turned around, and walked out into the blinding afternoon sun. The funeral was 2 days later. It was a closed casket service. 2 small white boxes were lowered into the cold, wet earth while the town watched. I stood there in my black suit, feeling like a statue made of ice. People came up to me, mumbling words that meant nothing. Better place. Fate. Tragedy. I nodded at them, but I wasn't listening. I was watching the perimeter. Sheriff Grant was there, standing near the back by the patrol cars. He was wearing his dress uniform, looking solemn and respectful. To anyone else, he looked like a pillar of the community mourning with a friend. But I saw the way he checked his watch. I saw the way his hand hovered near his holster when I looked at him too long. He knew. He knew about the glue in the lock. He knew about the accelerant. And he was burying the truth along with my sons. When the last shovel of dirt hit the wood, Grant walked over. He put a hand on my shoulder. It took every ounce of my training not to break his wrist right there in the cemetery. Go home, Mason, Grant said softly. Get some rest. You look like hell. I'm leaving town for a while. I lied. My voice was raspy, dry as dust. Can't stay in that house. Too many memories. Grant's shoulders relaxed. Just a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. That's a good idea. Go to the coast. Clear your head. We'll close out the file here. Yeah, I said. Close the file. I got into my truck and drove toward the highway. I watched in the rearview mirror as Grant got into his cruiser and turned the other way. I drove for 10 miles, just to make sure I wasn't being tailed. Then, I pulled onto an old logging road, killed the lights, and doubled back. I wasn't going to the coast. I was going back to the burn site. Night had fallen by the time I parked the truck in the woods, a mile from my property. I moved through the trees on foot. The air still smelled like smoke. It probably always would. I reached the ruins of the barn. Under the moonlight, it looked like a black wound in the earth. I pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves and clicked on my tactical flashlight. I stepped into the ash. Most people see a fire and think chaos. They think destruction is random. But it's not. Fire is a language. It leaves a story behind if you know how to read it. I moved to the center of the burn pattern, where the heat had been the most intense. I cleared away the top layer of debris. The floorboards here were gone, completely vaporized, exposing the concrete foundation. I ran my light over the concrete. There it was, spalling. The concrete had cracked and popped from rapid, extreme heating. Poor pattern, I whispered. I traced the line of the cracks. It wasn't a puddle. It was a line, a trail. Someone had walked backward, pouring the fuel as they went, leading out the door. I followed the trail to where the door frame used to be. The wood here was preserved on one side, protected by the door itself before it collapsed. And there, stuck in the charred wood, was something that didn't belong. It was a small, melted piece of fabric. Synthetic. It had snagged on a nail when the arsonist was backing out. I pulled it free with a pair of tweezers and held it under the light. It was blue, but not just blue. It was a specific shade, cobalt, and there was a partial embroidery visible on the edge. A golden scorpion tail. I felt a cold chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. The golden scorpion. That wasn't just a gang symbol. That was the personal guard of Viktor Volkov. Viktor was a ghost story in the criminal underworld. He didn't just run drugs. He ran a high-end trafficking ring. He moved product through the county lines using unparalleled brutality. Why was Viktor's personal guard at my barn? I pocketed the fabric. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't even a random act of violence. This was a message. But a message for whom? I had been retired for 5 years. I was a ghost. No one knew who I used to be, unless someone had talked. I left the ruins and hiked back to the woods, to a spot about 300 yards away, near an old oak tree. I found the rock I was looking for, a large, moss-covered stone that looked like it hadn't moved in a century. I pushed it aside. Underneath was a metal handle. I pulled. A hidden trapdoor groaned and opened. This was my insurance policy. My break glass in case of war box. I dropped down into the small concrete hole. It was dry and cool. I clicked on the overhead battery light. There, hanging on the wall, was my past. My black tactical pants. My vest. And on the shelf, my tools. Not guns. I didn't need guns. I picked up a canister of thermite paste. I picked up a remote detonator. I picked up a mask. I stripped off my funeral suit. It felt suffocating. I put on the black gear. It fit like a second skin. It felt heavy, but it was a good weight. The weight of purpose. I sat on the small bench and opened my laptop. I didn't have internet out here, but I had a database. I typed in Viktor Volkov and Golden Scorpion. The file loaded. It was thin. Viktor was careful, but he had soldiers. And soldiers had habits. I needed to find the bottom of the ladder so I could climb up to the throat. I scrolled through the known associates in the area. One name popped up. Felix, a street-level distributor known for selling party favors and specialized fuels for illegal burn pits. Felix operated out of a salvage yard on the east side of town. I looked at the clock. 2 a.m. Felix would be awake. Rats like him were nocturnal. I closed the laptop and stood up. I looked at the picture taped to the inside of the bunker door. It was a photo of Evan and Ryder, smiling, holding up a fish they had caught last summer. I touched the photo. My hands were steady. My heart was a block of stone. I know who they are, boys, I whispered. I climbed out of the bunker and sealed it shut. The wind was picking up, blowing the ash from the barn into the air, swirling around me like gray snow. I walked back to my truck. I didn't turn on the headlights. I didn't need to. I knew the way. Tonight, the salvage yard was going to have an inventory problem, and Felix was going to tell me exactly who ordered that blue fire mix. The morning was over. The work had begun. The salvage yard looked like a graveyard for machines. Rusting cars were stacked 3 high, creating a maze of jagged metal shadows under the pale moonlight. It was quiet, except for the distant hum of the highway and the occasional growl of a guard dog chained somewhere deep in the labyrinth. I didn't take the front gate. That was for amateurs. I went around the back, near the drainage ditch where the fence had rusted through at the bottom. I slipped under the chain link like oil, my black gear blending perfectly with the darkness. Felix's office was a converted shipping container in the center of the yard. Light spilled out of the single dirty window, cutting a yellow rectangle into the night. I moved silently, stepping on patches of oil-soaked dirt to dampen the sound of my boots. I reached the window and peered inside. Felix was there. He was a skinny guy with nervous energy, sitting behind a metal desk covered in fast food wrappers and cash. He was counting a stack of bills, licking his thumb every few seconds. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who didn't have a care in the world. He didn't know he was already burning. I bypassed the door. Doors make noise. Instead, I went to the external breaker box mounted on the side of the container. I pulled a small vial from my vest, a corrosive acid gel. I squeezed a single drop onto the master lock. It hissed quietly, eating through the steel pin in seconds. I opened the box and found the main power line. I didn't cut it. That would just kill the lights. I wanted panic. I bridged the connection with a small magnesium strip. Inside the trailer, the lights didn't just go out. They flared white hot, the bulbs exploding in a shower of sparks, followed by the pop of the TV blowing out. What the hell? I heard Felix scream. I kicked the door open. It flew inward, banging against the metal wall with a clang that sounded like a gong. Felix scrambled backward, knocking his chair over. He fumbled for a drawer, going for a gun. I was already on him. I didn't strike him. I didn't have to. I slammed a heavy canister onto the desk. Thud. Don't, I said. My voice was low, barely a whisper, but it froze him. Felix froze, his hand half open near the drawer. He looked at the canister, then up at me. I was wearing my tactical mask, only my eyes visible. To him, I was a nightmare manifest. Who? Who are you? Felix stammered. If you want the cash, take it. It's yours. I don't want your paper, I said, stepping into the room. The only light now came from the moonlight pouring through the open door. I want to talk about chemistry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small piece of charred blue fabric I had found at the barn. I tossed it onto the desk. You sell a specific blend, Felix. Blue fire, kerosene base, thickened with polystyrene, spiked with an oxidizer to make it stick. Felix's face went pale. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I don't know what you mean. I sell scrap metal. Don't lie to me, I said, leaning in. You sold 10 gallons of it 2 days ago. The buyer drove a dark SUV. He paid extra for the anonymity. I see a lot of people. Felix yelled, finding a shred of courage. Get out of here before I call my boys. I sighed. You're not listening, Felix. I unscrewed the cap of the canister I had placed on the desk. I poured a small circle of clear liquid around his hand, which was still resting on the table. This is a binary liquid, I explained calmly, like a teacher. Right now, it's harmless. It's just wet. I pulled a second vial from my vest. But this is the catalyst. I held the vial over the liquid circle. If I drop this, that liquid turns into a thermal reaction that burns at 4,000 degrees. It won't just burn your hand, Felix. It will eat through the bone, through the desk, and through the floor. You won't be able to put it out. Water just makes it angrier. Felix stared at the vial, his eyes wide, sweat beading on his forehead. You're crazy. I'm a father, I said. And you helped burn my children alive. The realization hit him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Who bought the fuel? Felix. I tipped the vial. A single drop hung on the lip. Dominic. He screamed. It was Dominic. The lieutenant. He runs the warehouse on 5th Street. He ordered it. He said Victor wanted a message sent. Dominic. I repeated the name. It tasted like bile. Please, Felix begged, tears mixing with the sweat. I didn't know. They just told me they needed to clear some property. I didn't know there were kids. I looked at him. I believed him. He was a pawn. A useless, greedy pawn. Killing him wouldn't bring Evan and Ryder back. And a dead man couldn't spread the fear I needed. I believe you, I said. I capped the vial and put it back in my vest. Felix slumped in relief. But Felix, I said, turning back at the door. If you make a call, if you warn them, I won't use the liquid next time. I pulled a flare from my belt, cracked it, and tossed it onto the floor. It hissed, bathing the room in a blinding red light. I'll burn this whole yard down with you inside it. I walked out into the night, leaving him sobbing in the red glow. I didn't go straight to the warehouse. I needed to prepare. I drove the truck to a secluded overlook above the city. I sat on the tailgate, looking down at the grid of lights. Somewhere down there, Dominic was sleeping. Or maybe he was partying, celebrating a job well done. I opened my kit. I needed something different for a warehouse. A warehouse meant open space, ventilation, airflow. I started mixing a powder in a plastic bowl. Potassium nitrate and sugar. Simple. A smoke screen. But I added something else, capsaicin extract. Pure heat. When this burned, it would create a cloud of pepper gas so thick it would feel like breathing lava. As I stirred the mixture, my mind drifted. I remembered the last birthday party. Evan had been so excited to blow out the candles on his cake. Make a wish, Daddy. Ryder had yelled. It's not my birthday, buddy. I had laughed. You make a wish. They had squeezed their eyes shut, blowing with all their might. The smoke from the candles had curled up, thin and gray. I stopped stirring. My hand was shaking. A single tear fell into the white powder. I wiped my face aggressively. There was no room for grief tonight. Grief was heavy. Grief made you slow. I packed the powder into repurposed soda cans and taped them shut with fuses. I made 4 of them. Dominic, I whispered to the city lights. You like smoke. I'm going to give you all the smoke you can handle. I packed the truck. The sun was still hours away. The city was asleep, but the fire was coming. The warehouse on 5th Street was an ugly, concrete block that sat in the industrial district like a tumor. It had no windows on the ground floor, only reinforced steel doors and cameras pointed at every angle. To a civilian, it looked like a storage facility for auto parts. To me, it looked like a fortress. But every fortress has to breathe. I parked the truck 3 blocks away in the shadow of a derelict textile factory. The wind was blowing south-southwest. Perfect. It would carry sound away from me. I moved fast, sticking to the alleyways. The weight of the chemical canisters in my pack was reassuring. I wasn't just carrying smoke. I was carrying consequence. I reached the perimeter fence. It was topped with razor wire, but the corner post was loose. I'd spotted it on satellite maps earlier. I shimmied up the concrete support pillar of the adjacent building and leaped across the gap to the warehouse roof. It was a 10-foot jump. I landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, my boots making a soft thud on the gravel-covered tar. I froze. I waited. 10 seconds. No alarms. No shouting. The guards were watching the street, not the sky. I low-crawled toward the massive HVAC units in the center of the roof. They were humming, pulling in the cool night air to ventilate the massive space below. Drugs need temperature control. Humidity ruins product. Big mistake, I whispered. I pulled a multi-tool from my belt and went to work on the maintenance panel of the main intake unit. The screws were rusted, but they gave way. I lifted the metal grate. exposing the fan blades spinning below. A draft of stale air hit my face. It smelled of cardboard and raw chemicals. I pulled the 4 soda can devices from my bag. I didn't set a timer. Timers can fail. I used a friction igniter. Snap. Hiss. I dropped the first can into the duct, then the second, then all 4. They tumbled down past the fans, clattering into the main air shafts. The thick, white smoke, laced with the concentrated capsaicin extract, began to pour out instantly, sucked greedily by the fans, and pushed into every room, every hallway, and every lung downstairs. I screwed the grate back on, but only halfway. I wanted them to know where it came from. I moved to the edge of the roof, overlooking the main loading dock. I lay flat on my stomach, peering over the ledge. It took less than 30 seconds. The first sign was the sound. It wasn't an alarm. It was coughing, a deep, hacking, wet retching sound that echoed through the metal walls. Then came the shouting, panicked, confused voices. Gas! Gas! Get the door! The steel loading doors rolled up with a screech. Men spilled out onto the concrete like rats escaping a flood. They weren't holding guns. They were clutching their throats, rubbing their eyes, falling to their knees. The capsaicin smoke was blinding them, searing their respiratory tracts. It feels like inhaling broken glass and hot sauce. It doesn't kill you, but it makes you wish you were dead. I scanned the crowd. I was looking for one man, and then I saw him. Dominic stumbled out last. He was a big man, wearing a sharp suit that was now ruined. He was coughing violently, his face red and swollen. He was dragging a duffel bag, probably trying to save the cash, but he dropped it to claw at his watering eyes. My eyes. I can't see. He screamed. I stood up on the roof edge. I was a black silhouette against the moon. Dominic. I shouted. My voice was amplified by the echo of the alley. He froze, squinting up through his tears, trying to find the source of the voice. The other guards were too busy dry-heaving to look up. Who's there? Dominic wheezed, reaching for his hip, but he was too disoriented to draw his weapon. I held up a flare. I cracked it, bathing the roof in red light, making sure he could see me. You bought a product from Felix, I called down. Blue fire. You used it on a barn. You used it on my family. Dominic's knees buckled. He knew. In that split second, the confusion left his face, replaced by pure terror. Mason. He choked out. That was just business. This isn't business, I said. This is foreclosure. I tossed the flare. It arced through the air, spinning slowly, a red star falling to earth. It didn't hit Dominic. It landed right on the open duffel bag he had dropped. The bag was full of cash. Paper is flammable. The money caught instantly. Dominic lunged for it, trying to stomp out the fire, but the smoke in his lungs made him collapse again, coughing uncontrollably. He watched helplessly as the flames ate his profits. But the real damage was inside. That pepper smoke. It sticks to everything. Every kilo of product inside that warehouse was now contaminated. It would taste like pepper. It was unsellable. Millions of dollars of inventory, ruined in 5 minutes. Tell Victor. I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. Tell him the fire is coming to his house next. Tell him I'm going to burn everything he built. Dominic looked up, his face a mask of snot and tears. He'll kill you. He'll kill everyone you know. I don't know anyone, I said. I'm already dead. I stepped back from the ledge, disappearing into the darkness of the roof. I crossed to the other side and rappelled down the back wall before the sirens started wailing in the distance. As I walked back to my truck, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel joy. I felt a cold, hard resolve. This was just the logistical strike. I had hurt their wallet. I had hurt their pride. But the war hadn't even started yet. I got into the truck and checked my phone. I had one missed message. It was from Logan, my brother. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since the argument about money. The text was short. I heard about the fire. I need to see you. I think I know why this happened. I stared at the screen. Logan. He was a gambler. A drinker. A man who always looked for the shortcut. Why was he contacting me now? A sick feeling settled in my stomach, heavier than the grief. I started the engine. The warehouse behind me was now spewing black smoke into the night sky, a signal fire for the whole city to see. "I'm coming, Logan," I whispered. I put the truck in gear. The fire cleanses, yes. But sometimes, when you clear away the ash, you find things you wish had stayed buried. Logan lived in a part of the city where the streetlights flickered and the potholes were deep enough to swallow a tire. It was a place where people went to disappear or to slowly drink themselves to death. My brother was trying to do both. I parked the truck down the street, keeping the engine running for a moment just to feel the vibration in my hands. I was still vibrating from the warehouse. The adrenaline from the roof was fading, leaving a cold, hollow ache in my chest. I walked up the cracked concrete stairs to apartment 4B. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. I knocked. "Free sharp wraps." There was a long pause. Then the sound of a chain sliding back. The door cracked open. Logan stood there, looking like a ghost of the man I used to know. His face was gaunt, his skin gray and clammy. He was wearing a stained undershirt, and his eyes were bloodshot. "Mason," he breathed, opening the door wider. I didn't think you'd come. You said you knew something," I said, stepping inside. The apartment was a wreck. Takeout boxes piled on the counter, empty beer bottles lining the windowsill like little brown soldiers. The TV was on, muted, flashing blue light across the dirty carpet. Logan closed the door and locked it, all 3 locks. His hands were shaking so bad, he fumbled with the deadbolt twice. "I saw the news," Logan said, not looking at me. "About the warehouse. They're saying it was a chemical leak. But I knew it was you." "Focus, Logan," I said, my voice hard. "The text. You said you knew why." Logan walked to the kitchenette and grabbed a bottle of whiskey. He didn't offer me any. He took a long pull, the liquid spilling down his chin. He wiped it with the back of his hand. "I need you to promise me something, Mason. Promise me you won't kill me." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stared at my brother. I looked at the bruise fading on his cheekbone, yellow and purple. I looked at the way he was favoring his left side, like his ribs were taped. "Who hit you, Logan? Promise me," he begged, his voice cracking. "I can't promise that," I said. "Talk." Logan slumped onto the sagging sofa, putting his head in his hands. He began to weep. It wasn't a mournful cry. It was the terrified sobbing of a man who knows he has run out of road. "I owed them, Mason. I owed them big. 50 grand. I tried to play the tables at the underground club. I thought I could double it, pay off the loan sharks. But I lost. I lost it all." I stood very still. "Who did you owe?" "Victor," Logan whispered. "Victor Volkov." My heart stopped. The world narrowed down to the point of a needle. "Go on," I said. "They came for me last week," Logan said, sniffing wetly. 2 guys. They broke my ribs. They said they were going to take my fingers next. They said there was only one way to clear the debt. He looked up at me then, his eyes pleading. "They wanted you, Mason. They knew you were ex-military, but they didn't know where you were living. You went off the grid. You hid your tracks too well." I felt the blood rushing in my ears, a roaring sound like a waterfall. "So you told them?" I said. It wasn't a question. They said they just wanted to talk. Logan screamed, standing up, his hands waving frantically. "They promised. They said they wanted to offer you a job. They said they needed a specialist, and if I gave them the address, they would wipe my debt clean. They swore on their mothers that no one would get hurt." I walked toward him. He scrambled back, tripping over the coffee table and falling onto the floor, crab walking away from me until his back hit the wall. "You gave them the address," I repeated. "You told them where my children slept." "I didn't know," Logan shrieked. "I didn't know they were going to burn it. I thought they would just wait for you to come home. Mason, please. I'm your brother." "My brother died a long time ago," I said. I reached down and grabbed him by the throat. I lifted him off the floor. He clawed at my wrists, his legs kicking uselessly. He was light, weak, Evan and Ryder. I whispered, bringing my face inches from his. They were in the loft. They were building a fort. Did you know that when you gave Victor the address? Did you mention the twins? Logan's face was turning purple. I mentioned. You had. Family. To show you. Had stakes. He had used my children as leverage. He had told the cartel I had a family to prove I could be pressured. He had painted the target on their backs. My thumbs pressed into his windpipe. It would be so easy. Just a little more pressure. A snap. And the man who sold my world for 50 grand would be gone. I looked into his eyes. I saw fear. I saw regret. But mostly, I saw a pathetic, broken creature. If I killed him, I was just cleaning up Victor's loose ends for him. Victor wanted me to suffer. He wanted me to become a monster. I threw Logan across the room. He crashed into the TV stand, the flat screen shattering on the floor. He gasped for air, clutching his throat, coughing violently. Get up, I barked. Logan looked at me, terrified. Are you going to kill me? No, I said. I walked over to him and kicked his leg hard. He screamed. I'm not going to kill you. That's too easy. I crouched down next to him. You're going to help me finish this. You know how to contact them. You know how the betting ring works. They'll kill me if I go back, Logan whimpered. They're going to kill you anyway, I said coldly. But if you help me, maybe you get to die like a man instead of a rat. I grabbed his collar and hauled him up. Where is Victor tonight? Not his soldiers. Him. Logan shook his head. He never comes out. He's paranoid. But there's a party at the Club Onyx. He won't be there, but his money will be. The weekly drop happens there. If you hit the drop, he'll have to come out. Who runs the drop? Ivy, Logan said. His right hand. The woman with the scar. Ivy. The woman who likely ordered the hit after Dominic secured the fuel. Get your coat, I said. Where are we going? Logan asked, wiping the snot from his nose. We aren't going anywhere, I said. You are going to the hospital to get those ribs taped up. And then you are going to leave town. If I ever see your face again, Logan. If I ever even hear your name. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. I turned and walked to the door. Mason, he called out. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked at the picture on the hallway table, an old photo of us as kids, smiling, muddy, happy. I took the picture out of the frame and ripped it in half. I let the piece with Logan's face fall to the floor. You kept the money, didn't you? I asked, not turning around. After the fire. After the boys died. You didn't give it back. The silence in the room was the only answer I needed. I walked out into the rain. The water felt cold on my face, but it couldn't wash away the dirt I felt on my soul. My own blood had sold me out. I got into the truck. I sat there for a long time, watching the raindrops race down the windshield. Club Onyx, I said to the darkness. I wasn't just going to burn a warehouse this time. I was going to walk into the lion's den, and I was going to introduce them to the only thing hotter than fire. I was going to introduce them to grief. Club Onyx sat on the riverfront like a black jewel, all glass and neon. The line to get in stretched around the block. College kids, tourists, people looking for a good time. They had no idea they were standing outside a slaughterhouse. I didn't use the front entrance. I came in through the loading dock in the back, where the liquor trucks made deliveries. The guard there was smoking, scrolling through his phone. He never saw me coming. I put him to sleep with a chokehold. No sound. No struggle. I zip-tied his hands and gagged him, then dragged him behind a stack of beer kegs. I moved through the kitchen. The cooks were too busy yelling orders to notice me slip past. The bass from the main floor vibrated through the walls, making the pots rattle on their hooks. I reached the hallway leading to the VIP lounge. That's where the drop happened. That's where Ivy would be. But something was wrong. The hallway was too quiet. No guards. No voices. Just the distant thump of music. I stopped. My training kicked in. This was a kill box. I looked up. The ceiling tiles had been shifted. Fresh boot prints on the dusty HVAC duct above me. They knew I was coming. Mason. A voice boomed over the PA system, cutting through the music. The dance floor went silent. I know you're here. My name is Victor. We need to talk. I pressed myself against the wall, scanning for exits. You've caused me a lot of inconvenience this week. Victor's voice continued, calm and amused. The warehouse. The dealer. Very dramatic. But you made a mistake. You came to my house. The emergency exit doors slammed shut, all of them. Magnetic locks. The civilians on the dance floor started to panic, rushing toward the doors, pounding on them. These people have nothing to do with this. I shouted toward the nearest camera. Exactly, Victor said. They're innocent, just like your boys were. Now you understand how it feels to watch helpless people burn. My blood ran cold. I've locked every exit, Victor said. And I've armed the sprinkler system with a surprise. If you try to leave, if you don't come to the VIP room in the next 5 minutes, I will flood this building with accelerant and light a match. 300 people will die, and it will be your fault. The civilians screamed. They were trapped. They were hostages. Walk to the VIP room, Mason. Hands up, or everyone dies. I clenched my fists. This was exactly what Victor wanted. He wanted me to walk into his trap, or he wanted me to become the villain. Either way, he won, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. I pulled my pack off and opened it. I didn't have much time. I grabbed the smallest smoke canister I had, a phosphorus blend. It created thick, white, non-toxic smoke. Harmless, but blinding. I cracked it and rolled it across the dance floor. It hissed, and within seconds, the entire club was swallowed in a white cloud. The civilians panicked harder, but I shouted over them. Everyone get down. Cover your mouths. This is not poison. Stay low and breathe through your shirts. I moved fast through the smoke, heading toward the breaker room. I knew club layouts. The power had to be centralized. I kicked the door open. Inside was the electrical panel. I didn't shut it down. That would trigger the backup system. Instead, I overloaded it. I jammed a metal rod into the main bus bar and stepped back. The lights exploded. Sparks showered the room. The magnetic locks on the doors disengaged with a loud click. Go. Now. I screamed. The civilians didn't need to be told twice. They stampeded toward the exits, coughing and crying but alive. I heard gunfire. Victor's men were shooting blindly into the smoke, trying to hit me. I dropped flat and crawled toward the VIP room. The smoke was my ally now. I reached the door and kicked it in. Inside, Ivy stood with a lighter in her hand, standing over a barrel of liquid. Her face was twisted in rage. You just killed yourself, she hissed. Maybe, I said, but I saved them. I pulled a flare gun from my belt and aimed it at the ceiling sprinkler directly above her. Drop the lighter, Ivy, or we both burn. Her hand trembled. She looked at the door. Her exit was blocked by smoke and chaos. She dropped the lighter. Smart choice, I said. I zip-tied her and dragged her out the back exit into the night. The club was emptying behind me, sirens already wailing in the distance. Victor had tried to turn me into a monster, but I wasn't the fire. I was the man who controlled it. I drove until the city lights were just aglow in the rearview mirror. I took Ivy to an abandoned textile mill about 20 miles out of town. It was a place of rusted machinery and silence, a place where screams didn't carry. I zip-tied her to a heavy steel chair in the center of the drying room. I didn't hit her. I didn't yell. I just set up a small camping stove on the floor in front of her and lit it. The blue flame hissed quietly in the damp air. Ivy watched me. She was tough. She had a scar running down her cheek that told me she had survived worse nights than this. She wasn't begging. She was calculating. You think this scares me, she said, nodding at the stove. I work for Viktor Volkov. I've seen men skinned alive. I'm not going to skin you, I said calmly, pulling up a crate to sit across from her. I'm just heating some water. I placed a small metal pot on the stove. Inside was a mixture of sugar and water. Simple syrup. You know what happens when boiling sugar hits skin, Ivy? I asked softly. It doesn't just burn. It sticks. It keeps burning until it cools down, which takes a long time. It fuses to the nerve endings. Her eyes flickered. The bravado cracked, just a hairline fracture. I don't want to hurt you. I lied. I want the truth. Why my children? Why burn them in a cage? Ivy laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think we care about your brats? You think Victor sits around planning how to kill kids? They were locked in, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Someone glued the lock. That was for you, Ivy spat. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat back. What? The hit wasn't for the twins, you idiot, Ivy sneered. It was for you. We were told you were in the barn. We were told you slept in the loft when you had bad nights. The cage. That was to make sure you didn't get out. We didn't know the kids were playing in there. We lit the fire and left. I felt the room spin. The guilt that had been sitting on my chest suddenly crushed me. They died because of me. They died because someone thought I was in that barn. You missed, I whispered. We missed, she agreed. And when we found out, Victor was furious. Not because the kids died. He doesn't care about that. He was mad because you were still breathing. Who told you? I asked. Who told you I slept in the barn? Ivy stayed silent. I reached for the pot on the stove. The syrup was bubbling now, thick and deadly. Don't, she said quickly, her eyes wide. A name, Ivy. It wasn't your brother, she said. Your brother just gave us the address. He didn't know your habits. He didn't know the layout. Then who? The one who cleared the scene, she said. The one who made sure the fire department arrived 10 minutes too late. The one who told the coroner to lose the evidence. My stomach turned to ice. Grant. Ivy nodded slowly. Sheriff Grant. He's been on Victor's payroll for 3 years. He provides the intel on the raids, and he cleans up the messes. He told us when you'd be alone. He told us the best time to strike. Grant. My friend. The man who stood at the funeral and told me to move on. The man who put a hand on my shoulder while I buried my sons. He hadn't just covered it up. He had helped plan it. I stood up and kicked the stove over. The pot clattered across the floor, the hot syrup hissing on the cold concrete, missing her feet by inches. Ivy flinched, curling her legs up. He's going to kill you, Ivy whispered. Grant isn't just a cop. He's worse than us. He hides behind a badge. No, I said, turning my back on her. He hides behind a lie. I walked to the door. Wait, Ivy yelled. What about me? You can't just leave me here. I called the state police 10 minutes ago, I said. They're on their way. You can tell them everything, or you can rot in prison. I don't care. I walked out into the cool night air. The stars looked down on me, indifferent and cold. I had a target now. A real target. Not a gangster. Not a drug dealer. A betrayal. I got into my truck and checked the load in the back. I had one special device left. I had been saving it for Victor. But plans change. I pulled my phone out and dialed the sheriff's station. Sheriff's office. The dispatcher answered. Tell Grant I'm coming in, I said. Tell him I have a confession to make. I hung up and drove toward town. The fire wasn't done yet. It was just getting started. I didn't go to the station. That would have been suicide. Instead, I waited in the alley behind Grant's house, watching the kitchen light through the back window. He lived alone, divorced, no kids. The house was modest, too modest for a man on Victor's payroll. But I knew better. The real money was hidden offshore, in accounts that didn't ask questions. At 11:47 p.m., Grant's patrol car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, unbuckling his duty belt, looking tired. He walked toward the back door, keys jingling. I stepped out of the shadows. Evening, Grant. He spun around, his hand flying to his empty holster. He'd already taken off his weapon. Mason. His face went pale. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said, walking closer. About a barn fire. About 2 boys. About lies. Grant's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Ivy told me everything, I said. You fed them intel. You told them when to strike. You told them I'd be in the loft. Grant's eyes darted to the house, calculating distance, calculating whether he could make it inside to grab his backup piece. Don't, I warned. He froze. Mason, listen to me. You don't understand how this works. Victor owns this town. The judges, the lawyers, half the force. If I didn't play ball, I'd be dead. So you killed children instead. My voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't kill anyone. Grant yelled. I gave them bad information. I told them the wrong time. I thought you'd be gone. I was trying to protect you by making them miss. They didn't miss me, I said. They hit my sons. Grant's shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked genuinely sick. I didn't know the boys were there. I swear on my life. Your life? I repeated. That's funny. Get in the car. What? I pulled a small remote from my pocket and clicked it. Grant's patrol car beeped twice. The doors locked. What did you do? Grant asked, backing away. While you were inside the station pretending to serve and protect, I paid your car a visit, I said. I installed something special in the ventilation system. Thermite paste, time-delayed igniter, sealed in the air ducts. Grant's face went from pale to ghost white. You're bluffing. I clicked the remote again. Inside the car, a soft hissing sound began. Smoke started seeping out of the vents. That's just the primer, I said. In about 90 seconds, the thermite ignites. It burns at 5,000 degrees. It'll melt the engine block, the frame, everything. And since the doors are maglocked from my override, you can't get in to stop it. You're insane, Grant screamed, running toward the car, yanking on the door handle. Where is Victor? I asked calmly. I don't know. I clicked the remote. The hissing got louder. The smoke turned from white to gray. Where is Victor, Grant? He moves around. I don't have daily tabs on him. Then give me something useful, or your car becomes a furnace and your neighbors call the fire department. And when they come, they'll find all the evidence I planted in your trunk. The accelerant receipts, the cash, the photos of my property, everything. Grant fell to his knees. The estate. He has an estate. 20 miles north, off Canyon Road. It's a compound. Gated, armed, everything. Address. 1447, Ridgeline Drive. It's under a shell company. Please, Mason. I clicked the remote. The hissing stopped. The smoke began to dissipate. Grant collapsed onto the gravel, gasping for air. There was no thermite, I said. Just a smoke machine and a speaker. You confessed to murder over $100 of theater props. Grant looked up at me, his face twisted in rage and humiliation. You bastard. I recorded everything, I said, holding up my phone. I'm sending it to the state police, the FBI, and every news station in the region. Your career is over. Your life is over. Victor will kill me. Grant screamed. I know, I said, turning to walk away. Better him than me. I got into my truck and drove north. I didn't look back. Grant was finished. The real target was waiting at 1447 Ridgeline Drive. Victor's fortress. The end of the line. The estate sat on a hill like a castle, surrounded by 10-foot walls and razor wire. Floodlights swept the perimeter every 30 seconds. Guard towers at each corner. Cameras on every angle. This wasn't a home. This was a war zone. I parked the truck 3 miles away and hiked in through the forest. I moved slow, staying in the shadows, watching the patrol patterns. Victor had 12 men on rotation. Professional, armed with automatic weapons. But they were watching for an army. They weren't watching for a ghost. I reached the eastern wall at 2 a.m. The guard in the tower was smoking, his rifle slung over his shoulder. I didn't kill him. I couldn't risk the alarm. Instead, I went under. The drainage culvert that fed the estate's water runoff was hidden behind overgrown bushes. It was narrow, barely 3 feet wide, but I squeezed through. The cold water soaked my gear as I crawled through the pipe. It smelled like rust and decay. I emerged inside the perimeter, behind the garden shed. I stayed low, listening. Voices carried on the wind. Guards talking near the main gate about a poker game. I moved toward the main house. It was a modern mansion, all glass and steel. Inside, lights were on. I could see figures moving. Victor's people, relaxed, drinking, laughing. They thought they were untouchable. I didn't go for the doors. I went for the mechanical room on the side of the estate. Every mansion like this had one, where the HVAC, water heaters, and gas lines converged. The access panel was locked. I used a small pry bar, popping it open with a quiet click. Inside was exactly what I needed. The main gas line ran along the ceiling, feeding the fireplaces and the kitchen stoves. I followed it with my flashlight until I found the junction box. I pulled a small device from my pack, a modified valve I had built in my workshop years ago. It looked like a standard gas regulator, but it had a hidden bypass. When triggered remotely, it would flood the system with gas instead of regulating it. I installed it in under 3 minutes. Then I moved to the fire suppression system. The sprinkler network was pressurized with water, fed by a large reservoir tank outside. I climbed the metal ladder to the tank access hatch. I opened it and looked inside. 10,000 gallons of clean water. Not for long. I pulled out 5 sealed containers from my pack. Each one held a concentrated gel, refined petroleum distillate mixed with a polymer thickener. Napalm, but stable. When mixed with water and pressurized, it would turn the sprinkler system into a delivery mechanism for liquid fire. I poured each container into the tank, watching the gel dissolve slowly into the water, turning it cloudy. The sprinklers wouldn't know the difference until it was too late. I sealed the tank and climbed down. I was sweating despite the cold. My heart was pounding. This was it. The final play. I moved back toward the perimeter, but a voice stopped me cold. "Hey, you. Stop." A guard had spotted me. He raised his rifle. I ran. I didn't shoot back. I dove behind a stone fountain as bullets chipped the marble behind me. Alarms started blaring. Floodlights ignited, turning night into day. I pulled the remote detonator from my pocket. 2 buttons. One for the gas. One for the sprinklers. I pressed the gas button first. Inside the house, the modified valve opened wide. Natural gas began flooding into the rooms, invisible, odorless, deadly. The guards were converging on my position. I had seconds. I pressed the second button. Inside the house, the fire suppression system detected the gas leak and activated automatically. The sprinklers engaged. But instead of water, they sprayed the gel-laced liquid. It coated the furniture, the floors, the walls, the guards inside. "What the hell is this?" someone screamed from inside. I pulled a flare from my belt, cracked it, and threw it through the nearest window. The house didn't explode. It bloomed. The gas ignited first, a rolling fireball that blew out every window simultaneously. Then the sprinkler fuel caught, and the entire estate turned into an inferno. The guards outside stopped shooting. They stared in horror as the mansion became a furnace, the flames roaring 30 feet into the sky. I didn't wait to watch. I ran back toward the drainage culvert, the heat chasing me, the screams fading behind me. I crawled through the pipe, my lungs burning, my ears ringing. I emerged on the other side and collapsed onto the wet grass, gasping for air. Behind me, Victor's empire burned. But the man himself was still inside, trapped in his fortress, buried in his greed. I stood up and walked toward the truck. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake. I wasn't home. But now I know your face. Now I'm coming for you." My blood ran cold. Victor was alive. He had escaped. And now the hunter had become the hunted. The text message wasn't real. It was a bluff. A ghost in the machine. Victor was home. I had seen his shadow in the panic room window before the fire took the east wing. He thought he was safe behind 4 inches of reinforced steel and concrete. He thought his private bunker would outlast the inferno. He was wrong. I didn't leave the perimeter. I circled back, moving through the chaos as the guards ran around screaming orders, too busy trying to save their own skins to notice the man in black slipping through the smoke. The panic room had an external ventilation shaft hidden near the pool house. I knew about it because I had studied the blueprints Grant kept in his trunk. It was designed to pull fresh air in case of a biological attack. I reached the vent. It was humming, pulling cool night air into the bunker below. I pulled the last canister from my pack. It wasn't an explosive. It wasn't napalm. It was a simple, pressurized tank of carbon monoxide, rigged with a remote valve. I hooked it up to the intake vent and sealed it with duct tape. Then, I hacked into the intercom system using the access panel on the wall. I patched my headset into the internal line. "Victor," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with the roar of the fire behind me. There was static, then a panicked, breathless voice. "Who is this? How did you get on this channel?" "You know who I am," I said. "I'm the man who cleans up messes." "Mason," Victor snarled. "You're dead. My men will find you. You think a little fire scares me. I'm in a blast-proof bunker. I have food and water for a month." "I know," I said. "It's a beautiful room. State-of-the-art. Air filtration. Climate control. You can't get in here." Victor yelled. "The door is sealed. It can withstand a tank round." "I don't need to get in," I said. "I just need to talk to you while the temperature rises." "What are you talking about?" "Fire consumes oxygen, Victor," I explained, leaning against the warm stone wall. "The house above you is burning at 2,000 degrees. That heat is soaking into the concrete. Your bunker is going to become an oven. The AC is on." Victor shouted, but his voice wavered. "I cut the power to the AC unit 5 minutes ago." I lied. I hadn't cut it. I had reversed it. The system was now pulling hot air from the firestorm above and pumping it down. "It's getting warm in there, isn't it?" I asked. Silence. Then, a curse. "Listen to me, Mason." Victor's voice changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It was desperate. "We can make a deal. I have $5 million in a safe inside this room. Cash. Diamonds. It's yours. Just turn the air back on." "5 million," I repeated. "That's a lot of money." Yes. Yes. Take it. Just let me go." "My sons were 8 years old," I said softly. "Ryder wanted to be an astronaut. Evan wanted to be a vet. How much is that worth, Victor? What's the market price for 2 futures that never happened?" "It was an accident," Victor screamed. "I told you. We didn't know." "You didn't check," I said. "You didn't care. You played God with fire, and now you're going to see what hell looks like." I turned the valve on the CO tank. The gas hissed into the vent. "What is that noise?" Victor demanded. "What are you doing?" "I'm giving you a choice," I said. "You can open the door and face the fire, or you can stay in there and go to sleep. Forever." "No. No. Please." I could hear him banging on the steel door from the inside. A hollow, frantic sound. He was trapped. The greatest gangster in the city, the man who terrified everyone, was just a scared animal in a cage. "Why?" Victor sobbed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because fire cleanses," I whispered. "And you are the stain." I listened for another minute. The banging slowed. Then it stopped. The CO was doing its work. Silent. Painless. A mercy he didn't deserve, but a justice he couldn't escape. "Goodbye, Victor." I disconnected the headset and crushed it under my boot. The fire had consumed the main house completely now. The roof collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending a plume of sparks into the night sky like a reversed waterfall. Sirens were getting louder. The real police. The firefighters. It was time to disappear. I walked back toward the woods, the heat on my back fading into the cool embrace of the forest. The monster was dead. The empire was ash. But as I walked, I didn't feel victorious. I felt heavy. I felt the weight of the ghosts walking beside me. I reached the truck and started the engine. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. It would always be empty. "We're done, boys," I said to the silence. "We're done." I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving the inferno to burn itself out. I didn't watch the news trucks swarm Victor's estate. I didn't need to. By first light, the sky over the hill was clear, just a thin haze drifting east on the morning breeze. The firefighters had hosed down the ruins, but the bones of the mansion still steamed. Victor's men were gone, scattered like roaches when the kitchen light flips on. My phone stayed silent. No calls from old contacts. No desperate pleas. Just one final text from an anonymous number before it went dead. It's done. Grant was in cuffs by now, his confession playing on every local channel. The machine was broken. I drove to the cemetery as the sun crested the hills. The air smelled clean, like rain on pine. Evan and Ryder's graves sat under a lone oak, the dirt packed firm from the funeral. Their headstones gleamed, simple marble, side by side, with little etchings of stars and paw prints I'd picked out myself. I knelt between them, the grass wet under my knees. From my pocket, I pulled two treasures: Ryder's tiny astronaut helmet, scratched from 100 pretend spacewalks, and Evan's toy stethoscope, the rubber earpieces chewed from nervous nights. I set them gently on the stones. For days, I'd been a machine, cold gears turning through smoke and betrayal. Now, alone with my boys, the dam broke. Tears came first hot, then cold, carving tracks down my face. I didn't wipe them. I let the sobs rip through me, shoulders heaving like a man surfacing after drowning. "I miss your voices," I choked out. "Ryder, you yelling blast off every morning." Evan, whispering secrets to the dog like he could understand. Memories flooded in, their laughter echoing in the barn loft, the way they'd tackle me after school, grubby hands on my shirt. You were my whole world. You made the dark days mean something. The wind rustled the oak leaves, almost like an answer. I thought of the cage, the flames, the monster who took them. But here, in this quiet spot, they weren't victims. They were the spark that burned evil clean. I pulled the Zippo from my vest, the heavy silver lighter from my black ops days, engraved with faded initials. Its flame had lit missions in deserts and jungles. Last night, it sealed Victor's fate. Now it was done. I flicked it open one final time. The flame danced blue and steady in my palm. "No more shadows, boys," I whispered. I snapped it shut and dug a hole with my fingers between the graves. The lighter sank into the earth like a buried promise. I stood, knees creaking. The town spread below, smoke-free streets, kids biking to school without fear. Victor's poison was gone. No more glued locks on innocent lives. No more brothers selling out blood for bets. The cycle ended with me. In the truck, I found the map I'd marked months ago, a coastal cabin, rented under a false name. No neighbors. Just waves, fishing lines, and quiet nights. I'd build birdhouses, plant a garden, let the salt air heal what fire couldn't touch. As I drove down the winding road, the graves shrank in the mirror. Not gone, just carried forward. Their light lived in the cleaner world I left behind. The road ahead stretched open, endless blue sky calling. For the first time in weeks, I breathed deep.